今天要分享的改编故事是闻鸡起舞，希望能在学习英语的路上给你带来收获。你的每个点赞和订阅都是对我莫大的鼓励。那么，咱们开始吧。
He was known as one of the laziest, most irresponsible kids in town, yet he grew up to become a general who terrified his enemies and inspired an empire. This is the real story behind Rising at Cockcrow, and it proves that the person you are at 14 does not have to be the person you are at 40. In the 3rd century, during the Western Jin dynasty, a boy named Zhu Ti lived in a big house with his 5 older brothers. His father, who had been a high-ranking official, died when Zhu Ti was very young. His brothers took over the family responsibilities. They managed the land, they collected the taxes, and they studied the Confucian classics to prepare for government jobs. Zhu Ti, however, was different. He didn't care about books. He didn't care about studying. All he cared about was swords and adventure. He would wander through the countryside, spending his days with farmers and common folks, not scholars. His brothers worried about him constantly. They thought he would never amount to anything. At that time, if you didn't study, you couldn't get a good job. If you couldn't get a good job, you couldn't support your family. Zhu Ti seemed headed for a life of failure. But here is where his character showed itself. Even though he didn't like books, he had a huge heart. He would often pretend that his older brothers had ordered him to give away the family's grain and silk to poor families in the village. The villagers loved him. They saw his generosity. His brothers saw his wildness. But one of his brothers, Zhu Na, saw something else. He saw potential. Zhu Na got a job in the capital city, Luoyang. He decided to take Zhu Ti with him. When Zhu Ti arrived in Luoyang, his jaw dropped. The streets were packed with merchants, scholars, and warriors from all over the world. He saw people wearing fine silks. He heard conversations about philosophy and politics. For the first time in his life, Zhu Ti realized how small his world had been. He realized that if he wanted to do something great, he needed to know things. He needed to learn. This was the turning point. Zhu Ti went back home and started reading. He read history. He read military strategy. He became incredibly smart, almost overnight. When he was 24, the local government recommended him for an official position because of his knowledge. He turned it down. Why? He didn't feel ready yet. He wanted to learn more. Eventually, he took a job as a clerk in the government office in Luoyang. This job wasn't glamorous. He was just a paperwork guy. But this job gave him the most important relationship of his life. There was another clerk in that office. A young man named Lu Kuan. Lu Kuan came from an even more powerful family than Zhu Ti. He was handsome, talented, and well educated. Some people say he was related to the royal family. On the surface, Zhu Ti and Lu Kuan were very different. But underneath, they shared the same fire. They both looked at the state of the empire and felt sick. The government was corrupt. Barbarian tribes were gathering on the borders. The royal family was fighting among themselves. Everyone in Luoyang acted like everything was fine, but Zhu Ti and Lu Kuan knew the truth. The empire was about to explode. They became best friends. They decided to live together in the same room, sharing the same bed, so they could talk all night. They would stay up late, discussing history, analyzing battles, and dreaming about the future. They made a pact. If the empire ever fell into chaos, they would rise up and save it. They would become heroes. One night, they were sleeping. It was the middle of the night, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. Suddenly, a rooster crowed. In ancient China, hearing a rooster crow in the middle of the night was considered bad luck. People called it the wild rooster or the ghost rooster. They believed it meant something terrible was going to happen. Zhu Ti woke up. He heard the crow. Then he kicked Lu Kuan awake. Lu Kuan groaned, "What? What's happening?" Zhu Ti said, "Listen. That rooster." Lu Kuan listened. He heard it too. He said, "That's a bad omen. Go back to sleep." But Zhu Ti shook his head. He said, "I don't think it's a bad omen. I think it's a message." Some people hear this and think it means disaster. But we should hear this and think it means it's time to work. It means we have no time to waste. From now on, every time we hear that rooster, let's get up and practice our sword fighting. Lu Kuan looked at his friend. He saw the fire in his eyes. He agreed. They got out of bed, grabbed their swords, and walked into the courtyard. The moon was bright. The air was cold. And 2 young men began to fight. They practiced until dawn. And they did this every single night after that. No matter how tired they were. No matter how cold it was. Rain or shine, when that rooster crowed, they rose, and they danced with their swords. This is the image that has lasted for almost 2,000 years. 2 friends, driven by ambition, refusing to sleep through their lives. They understood something that most people don't. Greatness requires discomfort. You have to get up when others are still sleeping. Now, here is where the story gets even more intense. Years passed. Zhu Ti and Lu Kuan both rose through the ranks. They became famous. Then, everything they had predicted came true. The barbarian tribes invaded. The capital fell. the emperor was captured. The Western Jin dynasty collapsed. Millions of people fled south, crossing the Yangtze River to escape the chaos. Zhu Ti led his family and hundreds of others on this dangerous journey. When they reached the south, a new emperor was set up. This new emperor, named Sima Rue, was not interested in fighting. He just wanted to enjoy his new palace and stay safe. Zhu Ti went to see him. He got down on his knees and begged. He said, "Your Majesty, the people in the north are suffering. They are under the control of barbarians. Give me an army. Let me cross the river. Let me take back our land." The emperor didn't really want to do it. It was expensive. It was dangerous. But he couldn't say no to Zhu Ti. So he gave him a title. He gave him a small amount of food supplies for 1,000 soldiers. But he gave him almost no weapons and no money. He basically said, "Okay, go ahead. But you're on your own." Most men would have given up. Most men would have said, "The emperor doesn't support me. What can I do?" But Zhu Ti was not like most men. He took his personal followers, a few hundred families who trusted him, and he crossed the Yangtze River. When his boat reached the middle of the river, Zhu Ti did something unforgettable. He took an oar and struck it against the side of the boat. The sound echoed across the water. And he made a vow. He shouted, "I, Zhu Ti, swear by this flowing river, that if I do not succeed in clearing the central plains of our enemies and restoring our land, I will never cross this river again." His words were carried by the wind. His followers felt chills run down their spines. This was not just a general. This was a man who would rather die than fail. Zhu Ti landed on the northern shore with almost nothing. He built his own forge. He melted down metal and made his own weapons. He recruited soldiers from the local people who were tired of being ruled by barbarians. And then he started fighting. He won battle after battle. Within a few years, he had recovered a huge amount of territory. The barbarian rulers were terrified of him. They couldn't defeat him in open combat. So they tried to negotiate. They tried to bribe him. They tried everything. Zhu Ti wouldn't bend. His army grew stronger. His reputation spread. It looked like he might actually succeed in driving all the invaders out. But here comes the dark part of the story. Remember the emperor who didn't want to support him? That emperor, Sima Rue, was sitting in his palace in the south, watching Zhu Ti's success. And instead of being happy, he became jealous. He became suspicious. He thought, what if Zhu Ti gets too powerful? What if he decides to become emperor himself? So the emperor did something terrible. He sent an overseer to monitor Zhu Ti. He stopped sending any support. He actually started to work against his own general. At the same time, there was conflict and fighting within the imperial court. Powerful men were scheming against each other. Zhu Ti heard about all of this. He realized that his own emperor didn't trust him. He realized that his government was tearing itself apart with jealousy while the enemy was still at the gates. He became sick with worry and frustration. The historians say he died of pent-up anger or grief. He was 56 years old. After his death, the territory he had fought so hard to recover was slowly lost again. His army fell apart without his leadership. The northern lands remained in enemy hands for centuries. It sounds like a tragedy, right? A hero betrayed by his own king. But here is why we still remember Zhu Ti. Here is why every Chinese schoolchild knows his name. Zhu Ti didn't know the ending when he started. He didn't know that the emperor would betray him. He got up every morning, before dawn, and practiced his sword fighting because he believed he could make a difference. And he did make a difference. For a few years, he gave hope to millions. He showed what was possible. And his family carried on his spirit. Generations later, one of his descendants became one of the greatest scientists in Chinese history. A man named Zhu Chongzhi. You might have heard of him. He calculated pi to an incredible degree of accuracy. He created an accurate calendar. He built amazing machines. The fire that started with Zhu Ti, that fire that burned in the courtyard at dawn, never went out. So when you hear the phrase "rise at cockcrow," don't just think about two guys getting up early to exercise. Think about the bigger meaning. It means committing to your purpose even when the world tells you to sleep. It means working when no one is watching. It means staying loyal to your mission even when the people who should support you are standing in your way. That rooster crow in the middle of the night. The one that most people considered a bad omen. Zhu Ti turned it into a call to action. What sounds like a warning to some people sounds like an alarm clock to others. It depends on who you are. Here is the question for you. What is the rooster crow in your life? What is that thing that keeps waking you up, that keeps nagging at you, that keeps telling you it's time to move? Maybe it's a dream you've been ignoring. Maybe it's a skill you've been meaning to learn. Maybe it's a problem you've been avoiding. Most people hear that voice and roll over. They go back to sleep. They call it a bad omen. They say, now is not the right time. They make excuses. But not everyone. Some people hear that sound and they get up. They grab their sword. And they start dancing. The difference between a life of regret and a life of meaning is simply what you do when you hear the crow. Don't sleep through your life. Get up.
下集请移步主页观看。